All right, Numbers 10, let's call this one Boundaries. Why? Because this is a chapter in which we see Israel on the move for the first time, and boundaries are going to seem to be a recurrent theme through three different characteristics of their move. One, trumpets are going to be a factor in rallying them together at various times, their move being not the least of those times. Second, they're going to have an idea as to what order they move out in now that we've already seen in which order they're going to camp in. It's not going to be a consistent theme that the order that they were told to camp in is going to be the order they move out in. And so it has a couple of different nuances or wrinkles in it as well. And then finally, we've heard all these laws about the way in which they're supposed to treat foreigners and the sojourners among them. But there's going to be an interesting statement about one particular group of the foreigners among them in verse 29, where it reads, "And Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place of which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will do good to you, for the Lord has promised good to Israel. But he said to him, I will not go. I will depart to my own land and to my kindred. And he said, please do not leave us, for you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you will serve as eyes for us. And if you go with us, whatever good the Lord does to us, the same we will do to you." And it's not clear, but it seems from there, they might actually go ahead and travel with them, those Midianites, as the children of Israel are moving into their own promised land. As God has already set up regulations for sojourners among them, we're starting to see the benefit they had from certain of those relationships already. And as with any relationship, it's going to be a mixed bag of positives and negatives. Why? Because in the very next chapter, we're going to see how a mixed multitude starts conflict within the congregation. That drags the people of Israel into it. So it's not so much a conflict between the people of Israel and the mixed multitude among them. It's all of them together going the wrong direction. But then after that, we're going to see how Moses himself, having already taken a Midianite wife, not from among the children of Israel, is going to also marry an Ethiopian. And so it is basically a reflection of true life experiences between people. Sometimes we have positives, sometimes we have negatives. And when we fail to see a nuance, we can replace the reality of relationships with the fictions that we create. Maybe that's the first thing to understand. Second thing to understand is an otherwise obscure passage with relationship to the role of trumpets in verse 9 of chapter 10, where it reads, "And when you go to war in your land against the adversary who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies." The other nuance there is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, comment section, like I said, is a welcome ground for helping correct anything I'm misstating here, because this is new ground for me in many ways. But one of the things I did notice before going through this particular section of scriptures is you don't see very much about Israel having rules of war for building empire. Again, they were being sent to dispossess of people who had begun to practice child sacrifice and ritual prostitution. Not content to simply practice it in their own territories, it seems as though they had begun to export it to their trading partners. But once Israel had dispossessed these people and cleaned up the land, they were expected to respect other nations' boundaries in much the same way they expected nations to respect theirs. And so when he makes this statement here, the nations who oppress you, they were permitted to go to war clearly against nations who oppressed them and invaded them. But beyond that, they were simply supposed to respect the territory that God gave them. So understand this. It connects to a passage or a principle we're going to see later on in the Word, when God warns his people not to allow their God to become their belly. Paul is going to write that in Philippians. He's going to say it's a tragic thing, not only out in the world, but it's a tragic thing that can overcome those of us in the body as well. Those who are called to be people of God. If we don't check our appetites, if we don't learn to respect boundaries and be content with what we've got, then we can be overcome with the desire to seek more, especially when we've gotten, like we talk about dogs, when they bite. The dangerous thing is they can get a taste for blood. Likewise, sharks, when they lose their fear of people, they can become man-eaters. And likewise with people. When we get a taste of all the things that power can accomplish, sometimes we can be overcome with the temptation toward aggression. And so what God is talking to his people about are rules of engagement for people who are supposed to respect boundaries so that their boundaries will be respected. His best to you as you go forward in him, though.